Hi guys, good morning. Happy Monday. How is everyone doing? I hope your weekend was great, and here we are today. No school today in America. Hi Melanie, good morning. So my name is Macy Sotantio, and I am a proud neurodivergent autism consultant, and I also am the founder of Autism Career Pathways, a nonprofit here in San Francisco Bay Area. So when I design curriculum I'm just saying that there are just so many things that we have to cover and educate others when it comes to best practices in how we educate our students and how we raise neurodivergent children, and also how do we support autistic people at work. So today we're going to talk about learning styles and how we could be more mindful of our students' learning preferences, and how we can incorporate and always think about our kids' learning styles, and how we could use those preferences for them to do better learning at school. So yeah, I am tired today. So anyways, okay. So what is learning style? Learning style is actually our own individual preferences when it comes to learning, how we choose to learn something. There are different ways we all learn something, and how do we prefer to capture the information, and also how our mind is able to best process it, integrate the information so it becomes part of our muscle memory, and also how we encode it in our mind and categorize it for future use. So when it comes to learning, for people, we're all a little bit different, and that's why I think today's topic is so important. So the structure of today, I'm going to go over all of the different learning styles. So far, I managed 8. I said at least 7, and I came up with 8 different kinds of learning styles. And then after that, we're going to take all these different learning styles and study tips or learning tips into our IEP segment towards the end. I also want to give you guys a couple of examples of a good IEP goal versus an IEP goal that's just too structured, specific, or too broad. So stick with me till the end. If you see me looking away, it's because I'm looking at my notes today. The reason that we need to be more mindful of our students' learning style preferences, it's because at school and at home, these preferences can actually become the beginning point. So whatever goal we're working on, if we're always start by asking this question, well, how does my child prefer to learn? And always start from there. And for parents, when you start from sharing knowledge about how your child best learn, just from your observations, from what you remember just hanging out in the kitchen with your child, that also communicates that you are a very involved parent, and you can start your IEP meeting in a positive way, and you are in the driver's seat, and you always talk about the strengths. Always start with the strength and person centered, strength-based growth mindset. That should drive your IEP meeting, because it's not discussed or thought about for student. We just talk about the performance, the specific goals. That is not going to cut it. So this is why I'm doing this today. Okay, so ready? We're gonna name all of the learning styles. Hi Sylvia. Hi everyone. Come on in. That's number 1. Visual learners. Number 2, verbal or social learners. Number 3, kinesthetic learners. Number 4, reading or writing learner. Number 5, auditory learner. Number 6, logical learner. Number 7, contextual learner. Number 8, solitary learner. There you go. But don't worry, I'm going to go over all of these one at a time. Okay. Okay, the first one is visual learners. So for autistic people, this is commonly known that we are all visual learners. It means that I'm sure you all have heard of thinking in pictures. So the way we process information the best way is if we see a picture. Or images, such as it could be a map, it could be a diagram, it could be symbols, it could be colors, numbers, like all things visual related. Charts, diagrams, sketches, visual stories. So all of these different ways, I think I said photos, these are a lot of autistic people that really helps us. YouTube School has been great for me because I learned so many. I don't know about you guys. This in 2020, we all had a lot of time to learn of how to fix things, how to try new recipes on YouTube channels. It's because we can see it over and over again. So in school, for visual learners, teachers have learned different ways to incorporate schedule and so on using like pictures. So that's visual learners. How do we know when our student is a visual learners? You see them draw or doodles or just, that's what they like to do. My nephew learned to sketch actually very, very early on at the age of like 24 months, very intricate doodling and drawing, especially when he's out and about. They seem to understand when you show them a picture. An example would be if you tell a child, okay, go to the kitchen. And on the way to the kitchen, they might seem lost. But if you show them a picture of the kitchen and then say, go to the kitchen, they will be able to retain that visual as they walk to the kitchen, and they're more likely to be able to do it the right way. So that's how you know. Visual schedules is also helpful for visual learners. So I think this is pretty common strategies that you might see in your kiddos. Okay, learning tips for visual learners. You can use color coding. So for example, a school homework or school assignment that needs to be done can be all put in a red folder, and things that are due the following week, maybe in yellow folder, and so on. So all of these strategies, if you know that your student or your child is a visual learner, you can really empower them and help them to be independent in terms of managing their own schoolwork using all these strategies. So using color highlighters, so you give them a highlighter as they read the books, and help them to use different color coding maybe as they read. That might be helpful. They also benefit greatly from direct modeling, you guys. So for parents here, I want you to hopefully be able to model and say this a lot, like watch mommy first, watch daddy first. And if you can help them to be an active visual watcher, visual learner, that would be amazing. Because imagine if your child knows, oh, if I can just focus and watch what my mom is doing, or watch what my friends are doing, what my teacher is doing, it will help them so much, and that will also reduce the anxiety level. So practice that. Watch me first, watch daddy, or watch your brother, or watch so-and-so in the classroom. That's a catchphrase that you can practice throughout the day, okay? So that's their job, they are a good watcher. You can actually tell them, you are being a good watcher. So in the ABA ways, this is called observational learning. and it's actually a really good objective to work towards, especially when you're doing, don't just do it with schoolwork, but do it with fun stuff like making Play-Doh or cooking in the kitchen. So this is what we do with YouTube. We watch over and over again, right? And also it's helpful to show a photo of the end product. So you can show, if you're building Legos, build one first. If you're like cooking, of course, you have, the sample of the end goal there. So just anything that you can help your child to understand visually, that is the goal. That would be really helpful. Visual learners. Number 2, verbal or social learners. This is me with things that are special interests of mine. I can talk about it a lot. So verbal/social learners love to talk about their special interests, and they don't mind the audience. In fact, they want people to listen to them all the time and not necessarily the other way around if you're autistic. So verbal learners are very hyperverbal. They may start talking way early and have very robust vocabularies. They can go on and on describing things. They process information best by describing something to others. I know that maybe it doesn't make sense, but like for me, if I'm thinking about something difficult, when I info dump or just be able to share with my husband, I actually understand it better, and then I can write it down better, right? So that's the process. How do we know if our kiddo is a verbal/social learners? They interrupt a lot. They tend to be very random. I am known to be a very random person. Ask many questions. Their use of vocabularies tend to be higher if you have a young child, but they would speak using language and vocabularies at the very higher level and might be very specific to their interests, but you'll see that. They also repeat themselves. I'm a big time repeater. So, because I forget that I've already asked the question, or I've already, anyways. Okay, learning tips for, hi Melanie. Yeah, thank you. I'm not the only way. Melanie is the moderator of Autism Grandma on Facebook. She's so awesome. And Melanie is also autistic. So Melanie and I like to compare notes. So it's nice to know that I'm not the only way. Okay. Learning tips for verbal/social learners. So if you know that your kids have this learning preference, I think hearing an audio recording is really helpful. So if you can actually just audio record them talking about it, because there's something about listening to your own voice that helps you process better. So if, for example, if they have a lot of reading materials that they have to read boring stuff from school, actually, if you just have them read it and audio record it, and then later you can get rid of the book, the written materials, and you can just have them listen to it. And of course, for adults, audiobooks and podcasts, that will be really, really helpful. Peer pairing or study groups. This is helpful, I think, for some people. It would not be good if you have ADHD like me, because I get distracted. So I think if you can manage it, you can facilitate it with another friend in the classroom, it could be beneficial. Maybe you can facilitate by saying you guys have to take turns, because otherwise one person will just take over. Okay, so we benefit from comparing and contrasting one particular topic. So this is how, if you're autistic and you're paired with a buddy and you have and you know you have to take turns, this is how you can actually learn to be more flexible this way. And also the last tip for verbal learners, use an outline to keep track of things, because we tend to digress a lot, and at the end of 2 hours we actually don't remember what was talked about. So there's the positive and the negatives. Okay, so number 3, kinesthetic learners. So this is a huge one, guys. For autistic little boys, well, the traditional classroom setting, educational setting, how we expect students to be well behaved and sit properly and not make any noise, sit and just do work at their desk. You know, it's designed actually more for girls. So for neurodivergent students, the way they're expected to show learning readiness and learning behaviors, and the way they're taught also, it's really not the best way that they can productively process information. A lot of autistic people, well, actually all autistic people have sensory differences, and if we're allowed to move, while we learn, we can actually process information better. So a kinesthetic learner means that you learn best through multi-sensory input, particularly in using tactile representations, right? So good school environments would be Montessori approach, the Waldorf approach. My son is in project-based curriculum, which is awesome. So you might walk into the classroom and you see the students working on the same subject, but you will see a small group, you will see one-on-one work with the teacher on the subject. You can see, you know, couple kids on the computer, but they're all working on the same subject, but they're all allowed to do it in a little bit different ways. And then in the end, they usually come together to share what they've learned. So it's very proactive and it's very, very interactive. Kinesthetic learners. So think about it. So people with poor executive functioning issues and poor working memories, that's actually most autistic people, I think, really, really need this approach. So for me, I can't tell you enough that like for me to just read instructions, I can't follow it. I can't give you the outcome to the best of my abilities. So it's actually, if you expect students to just follow instructions, many of them cannot do it because they lose track of where they are in the process, you know. But if you allow them to do the hands-on part as they read the instructions, that is much, much better. So think about multi-sensory. Okay, how do you know when you have kids who might benefit from multi-sensory approach? You see a lot of kids, of course, being very fidgety, a lot of kids who look very disinterested, a lot of kids who just need movement. You know, they like to walk around the classroom and they can become disruptive actually. But actually what they're telling you is that my body needs to move in order for me to be able to listen and process information from you, from what's going on. So keep that in mind. Okay, learning tips for kinesthetic learners. Experiments all day. At home, cooking is great for that. Learning experiments, you could do that at school as well. We work best if just we're allowed to try different ways. Okay, one more thing with kinesthetic learners, you see them from very early on. They love to open things. You see kids who love to just take things apart, put it back together. That's another sign. Hands-on practice all the time, and it's going to take a lot of repetitions and opportunities for them to get the hang of it. Okay, combo approach, you know, so combine written instructions with experiments and talking it out, reflections, use also pictures, videotape the process so they can go back to it, you know. So with kinesthetic learners, it's actually really a lot of fun. You know, you could do lots of projects. Projects are great, project-based. So kinesthetic learners, they can show you the knowledge. So a lot of non-speaking people, they actually understand the process really well, but they can't write it down. So if the output is an essay, that's really, really hard. But they can show you best if they're allowed to just demonstrate what they've learned. So just keep that in mind. And also, as a general rule, you want to get the kids involved in real life experiences and also meaningful practice. That's really, really important to help them, motivate them to learn best, okay? Number 4 is reading/writing learners. So I'm also one of these learners. This means that our kiddo learns best through the process of reading something, reading and writing it. So it's very strange because you would think, well, autistic kids don't like to write. They may have dysgraphia, they can't write, but they can type. Right? So for me to prepare for this morning, I actually wrote down by hand. For some reason, for me, if I write it out on papers, I wrote like 4 pages at a time, like 3 times. You know, that I was able to extract and organize my thoughts better. So if we're allowed extra time to read, you guys, and to be able to write it out, write an outline, and don't be rigid. Allow them to write it in different ways. I write best with bullet points. I'm really good at creating bullet points and PowerPoint presentations, but I'm a very poor, like, I will never probably write a book because I'm just not good. So they're different outputs, writing outputs. So keep that in mind. So how do we know when our kid might benefit from reading/writing process? Is of course you have the hyperlexic kids, the early readers, you know, where you see them just read a lot ever since they were young. They're always they read a ton of books. Steve Jobs, I heard that he could read like 10 books at a time and be able to keep track of the content. You know, I can't do that. But, you know, so reading and writing learners. Yeah, there you go, Melanie, writing notes. Yeah, so learning tips for this group of learners. Of course, journaling is awesome. Diaries, teach your kids to write diaries, and it could be a combination of collecting mementos. It could be, you know, if your kids cannot draw or write really well, you do that part, but you teach them the purpose of collecting memories through journaling or having diaries or using apps like Evernote so they can go back to it. And of course, Dr. Google, you know, we all rely on Dr. Google because we read. Like that's how this type of learners, they're very good at school. When during group projects, usually we're assigned that role of your job is to research all these things. We're really good at that. We like doing that, okay? But keep in mind to always allow time to process, because it still takes us a lot of time to read, process, and be able to write it down, okay? All right, so auditory learners. This is a group of learners who learn best actually by listening to information. They have excellent auditory memory where they can hear something and immediately they can encode it and produce something the same or very, very similar. So you hear, of course, like autistic talents, musicians, where they can memorize pitch, they can memorize like phrases they hear in the movies, you know, Disney characters and so on. You know, it's because it's multi-sensory approach, but they just, you know, autistic people are attracted to certain types of voice inflections, repetitions, it's all in our minds. So that's what it means. Auditory learners learns best by listening to information. They can repeat and produce pitch, lyrics, phrases, numbers, and sometimes conversations that I'm sure some of your kids remember things you've said like 5 years ago and it's still in their mind, right? Auditory learners. Like, how do we know when we have auditory learners at home? Because, okay, this is an important one. You'll see your kids quietly listening to everything you talk about. Like, you see these autistic kids, at the dinner table, for example, they can't participate in conversations, but you see them like a big sponge absorbing everything. You want to be very careful. Please do not talk about your kids in front of them. That's a big no-no, because not only they listen, they hear everything, they also remember everything, right? So if you're saying damaging things, they will remember that forever, right? So learning tips for auditory learners. So I've got a list here. They do very well with audiobooks. I would say record things that they have to read, because if the reading might be hard, you can always have them read it, or you read it and audio record it, and then that's the materials they review. Talking out loud, it's also good. Talking out loud it's not the same as being bossy, you guys, for the parents and teachers here. So talking out loud might be just repeating slowly the text materials and allowing time to process. Podcast is great. And I think reading in general is such a great activity that you could do with your children every day. So it's something nice. Don't make it a test. Don't ask questions. Just read to your children before bedtime. Don't expect anything. It's the end of their day. They are allowed quality time with mom and dad, reading without having to perform again. So please don't do that, because if you have auditory, if this is your thing, being able to listen to people, being able to listen to audio recording and learn from it, you guys, if we always test them when we read with them, they're going to hate it. They're going to just shut down. Okay, so keep that in mind. Pay attention to your kids while they listen and really spotlight that. If they're really paying attention or they look very, very interested, spotlight that, because that means they're being an active listener, and that will serve them well in the long run, even as adults working. Imagine you have to listen to so many people in the boardroom meeting. You don't care about what other people are saying, but because you've nurtured this since they're little, they will respect what other people are saying, because they can think about it, so they're actually good listeners, right? Okay, number 6, hang in here with me. Logical learners. So these are kids who learns best with logic, rules, reasoning, patterns. A lot of coders out there, this is their strength, that they do really well, right? So when it could be seeing a collection of items, but we don't just see it. We can immediately reorganize them in their mind based on the similarities in our mind. So I'm a little bit like that as well, right? So how do we know when our kids have this type of learning preferences, logical learners? It's actually very easy, you guys, to spot this. So usually our kiddos love to, they are good problem solvers, right? You see them like, okay, change the channel. Or like, can you fix this? Can you, they tend to be very good with anything related to, if you don't know how to do something on the iPad, on the computer, or on your TV, just ask your kid, because your kid will be able to problem solve it, right? So they also ask why questions. My husband actually told me, you know, I'm gonna write on your tombstone, like Macy Sutantio, the why, like, because I ask a lot of why. You know, in order to get me to do something, you have to convince me that there is a good reason to do it. So logical learners need to know why. You can't just tell them, no, don't do it. They have to know why they need to do it, right? So logical learners have their own system, and their system is good, but it can also be rigid because it's my way or the highway. So, but you can use this as a keep in mind to compare and contrast your system versus their system. And if you share a common thing, that's how you help them to be more flexible. Okay, so logical learners may be rigid. So how do we know they may be rigid? Once they assume something or they learn something, it's very hard to undo it, even though it's not correct. That's how you know that you have a logical learner at home or at school. They're very much rule bound, and they're all also very, very competitively driven. So that's how you know, okay? Learning tips for logical learners. Use board games. You could use puzzles, math problems, you know, anything that has a close, like a definite close and definite outcome, because it's helpful for us to know, like, okay, that's the end goal. It drives us to be able to go through the process better. So close-ended activities or clear end goals, that's great for us. Usually we're really good with math or anything to do with math. So if your teacher use hierarchy and sequences of events to teach the how-tos, so then we have to be able to see the steps ahead of us and be able to follow it in a logical way, right? So those are logical learners. All right, so if I see some questions here, I'm gonna go over them later. Okay, let's finish this. Number 7 is contextual learners. So this is a big one. So autistic people often miss context in general because we tend to hyper-focus on our own interests. And when it comes to social communication, context is very, very fluid and ever-changing. And it's not necessarily something we seek. So I think we often miss context in general. But when you have... okay, contextual learners actually learn well if it's certain kind of knowledge, if they see the grouping and the information is categorized for them. So for example, when we go grocery shopping, we actually rely on the grouping of objects, what we know of them. So if dairy products is in one place, you know, dry goods, vegetables, everything in life, there's all these underlying categories that we just know and learn over the years through our experiences. Now, contextual learners actually thrives on this. So how do we know? Okay, this is really important, guys. When you have kids who seem to be easily confused, but like one day, for example, they know, I don't know, shoes. You show them a picture of shoes and one day they know it and tomorrow they don't know it anymore. You know, one day you ask them to get something, they know it, and another day they don't know it, right? Because these kind of kids need context. So how do we know? Usually you have kids who actually seem to understand just daily opportunities better. Like if you tell them, okay, bring your dishes to the sink or put in the trash, put in a hamper, right? They will do that just like that. But if you teach them trash bin, or hamper by showing them picture separately. They're on and off because they need the context to be able to understand. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is actually quite common for autistic kids. So the context, if you use the context, it might be really, really helpful with the inconsistencies of learning. So learning tips, this is an important one for teachers and parents. You want to teach everything in context. So don't just teach them spoon, teach them a collection of eating utensils and how they're used with the plates and the bowls. You know, that's how they're going to be able to remember it better. Okay. Let's see. Yes, so you want to think about the categories, functions of objects. You want to think about colors, teach them all things red, teach them things you find in the bathroom, a collection of things that makes sense to the child. That's how you're going to, so you're going to travel from one room to another and you're going to be able to just have them learn it that way, okay? In the classroom, you can easily adapt this, okay? Number 8, finally, last one. There are more, but this is just, to me, this is important. Okay, solitary learners. As much as I like to talk, when it comes to learning new information, I need my noise canceling. So these are learners that would learn best in a quiet environment. That is totally me. So if you have kids who can only process one thing at a time, give it to them. Because even with people walking around them, it's distracting. So solitary learners, where it is what it is, quiet environment. So learning tips, of course, would be to use noise canceling headsets and giving them personal space. And this applies all the way to adults, okay? All right, so I'm gonna take the time to kind of scroll your questions here. How are you guys doing? Was that too much information? I tried to do it as quickly as possible. Okay, so Sylvia said Benjamin is visual. Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. I'm so sorry I didn't have a chance to wave to everyone. But I appreciate all of you guys being here. Yes, Sylvia. It's most of the time, learning styles is multiple for everyone, and it also changes as you get older, of course, but the neural differences and the challenges are the same. You just learn as you get older to be able to be aware of, okay, this is the best way that I can learn, right? Like, for example, as much as I love cooking and baking in the kitchen, there are certain kinds of cookbooks that I would buy or not buy because I know myself. I rely on pictures, so I only would use cookbooks with a ton of pictures because that motivates me. Okay, so our job as parents is really learn and observe. How do we know all these cues? What kind of a learner our child is? We observe. But if we always tell them what to do, then it's about us and not about them. So we miss a lot of important information. All right, so yes, so PECS, which is Picture Exchange Communication System, it's not appropriate for every child because a lot of times it's not being done correctly. You are right. So that's a whole different subject. Oh, but next Monday, the autistic speech therapist Rachel Dorsey will join me. So if you have PECS question, ask her directly. So ask an autistic adult, who is a speech therapist. So that's next Monday. We have to be in the zone. All right, so let's move on to IEP Keep in Mind, and how do we incorporate all of the learning styles that our child has, and incorporate that into your IEP goals. As I said before, your information about your knowledge about how your child best learn at home. You know, that is really gold information to bring up during the IEP, an IEP meeting. It should drive the IEP. And it's also helpful for you to take notes of what you observe and also make little video clips to take to the IEP meeting to show, look, my son can make decisions. He loves cooking, so he can follow instructions, visual instructions, or, you know, a YouTube clip. And that is a very complex process when you think about it. A little kid can actually follow a whole YouTube clip and actually make cookies. That's complex. That's gold. So you want to share this information with your IEP team. And the IEP meetings should actually be like grounds for sharing tips and how we can work together to create educational goals. Okay. Okay, so tip number 1 is the why bother. You want to make sure that you ask each other during the IEP meeting, why do we bother to work on this particular goal, right? Functions over skills. You know, what is the function of this particular goal? Is it actually a foundational piece that this child will benefit as the child progresses throughout the year and also for the next grade? That's the difference when we are creating a set of goals that are not just the skills, but it's a foundational pieces. So always ask that question, and you can tell your IEP team, you know, look, I'm not being a difficult mom. I just want to make sure that these are meaningful goals. Okay. All right. So functions versus skills. So don't focus on too specific of a goal, because a lot of times your child can already do it, or your child can do it very, very quickly if you give them the learning accommodations, which we just went over those, a ton of tips for them, right? So the learning tips, you can take whatever you want and mention it during the IEP meetings to experiment at school to see if it's really helpful, right? If it's helpful, then you see them like learning, pick up the learning pace. It's very important. Okay, so do not focus on fixing behaviors. A lot of times when I look at IEP goals, it just breaks my heart, because on and on and on, you know, behaviors such as hitting, running away, and disruptive behaviors and so on is so much. It's almost like it's the core, that's a language throughout an IEP plan. And, you know, people don't realize that these behaviors come from a child who cannot learn, because the learning conditions, the optimal learning conditions are not given to them, right? And they're also being expected to perform at a neurotypical level, age-appropriate level, because they're being compared to what neurotypical kids or students can do, you know, and autistic students are not neurotypical. Their brain are not, their mind is not less, it just functions differently. So please keep that in mind. Advocate for your child this way, because the goals, you know, if you fix on fixing the behaviors, it's like digging a hole, covering it, dig another hole. It's so much time wasted. Okay, so self-regulation as part of IEP goals. This should be top and centered. I think every autistic or neurodivergent student should have this at the very, very top. Your OT at school should drive this, as well as you as a parent, because you know how your child can best self-regulate at home. And this can be actually a universal design, you know, access to sensory breaks could be a basket of fidgets, or just a basket of fidget in front of the student because they can't share fidgets anymore. Or like visuals to allow the student to know if my body needs to move, I'm allowed to stand and listen, right? Or maybe there's a room in the classroom where they can sit on the beanbag and listen, because beanbag provide sensory input for their body so they can focus better, right? So yeah, so there are all these tips that if it's incorporated into the classroom as part of a universal design and all the students are allowed to access, then it's no shame anymore, right? The way IEP language is written, because it's very much focusing on fixing the behavior, the students themselves feel like, oh, it's like, why am I so weird? Why do I need these things, you know? Why am I so different? Why do I learn differently? As opposed to a universal design where everybody can benefit from having sensory breaks, incorporate movement breaks into your classroom routines, okay? So I'm going to give you wording of sensory related IEP goals, and you can take the wording with like all of your IEP goals. So this is for the sensory regulation part. So with sensory support, and you want to write it with sensory support, in parentheses, like access to fidget box, or student will be able to attend to present task, for example. And then you can quantify it however you want to do it, right? Given access to sensory support, student will be able to communicate his needs using a variety of verbal and nonverbal communication methods. So this one is, I think, complete. Access to sensory support, you want to write it in parentheses what they are. And student will be allowed to communicate in different ways. So verbally is okay, or bringing a picture is okay, or also using body language is okay. You know, so we want to make sure that teachers know that what does that mean exactly, communicate his needs using a variety of communication methods. And this is where parents, you guys can help a lot to translate what is how does your child communicate, okay? All right, any other questions, you guys? So I think that's pretty much. Okay, so any questions? Any other questions? Does anybody have an IEP goal that I need to deconstruct? If you have any questions, you can always go on my Linktree link on my profile, and there is a Calendly link there, so you can like set up a meeting with me. So I help parents prepare for IEPs all the time. So what I think my talent is to help you guys connect the dots from using a neurodiversity paradigm. So, you know, I don't really go to IEP meetings anymore. It's too much stress for me, but I love helping parents to prepare for IEP meetings or just anything school related. Yeah, so any other questions? Okay, you have a goal for social communication. Okay, yeah, I didn't cover that. That's another one. That's a big one, Sarah. I think I will, next week, I think I will chat about the social communication goals with our resident autistic speech therapist, Rachel Dorsey. So please come to that. So the social goals is another tricky one, because we don't want it to be written in such a specific way. We don't want to teach our autistic kiddos to mask and pretend. We definitely don't want to do that, right? So, but in general, when you write social communication goals, I actually have a goal here. Hang on. Okay, so here's here's an example of a social communication goals. Hang on. Okay, here's an example, Sarah, how you can write it. During a social opportunity with another peer, she will be able to process a discussion topic and participate by acknowledging and reciprocating verbally and non-verbally. And you have to write down, what does that mean non-verbally, using visual expressions, gestures, body orientation in 2 back and forth opportunities. So there you go, Sarah. That's a better way to write social opportunity, where we really describe how our autistic kiddo might be able to reciprocate, because we do reciprocate in a different way, right? So that's an example. Here, another question about concentrate to what I'm teaching. Actually, the question is, are you offering something? Are you teaching in the way that's attractive to your child or your student? Because we cannot teach autistic students the same way that we teach a neurotypical child. So this is where I think, if you're a parent, if you're a teacher, you want to relearn it. You want to set aside personal biases, because if you're expecting your child to perform, I wouldn't want to do that either, you know. I just went over a ton of learning tips above, so you might want to just take a step back to just not expecting your child to perform for you, but really thinking about, what can I do as an adult guide to share my experiences? And you want to release the need from you to expect your child to perform for you, because your child doesn't have to respond verbally, doesn't have to follow instructions in order to understand what's going on. A lot of times our kids know exactly what the adults want from them, but because we're not offering anything meaningful to them, they know, but they don't want to share what they know with us. So that means it's on us as an adult to really evaluate, who am I first, and what can I do differently to be a better attractive and inspiring guide to my child. So you want to take a step back and just stop the bossing around, stop pointing to things, stop. Autistic students are not performers. They're tired of following what people ask them to do. So, and what it looks like is like, I'm distracted. But what they're telling you is that I'm not interested, or what I'm telling you is that I don't learn that way. And because we're so stuck as adults on certain criteria and performance, we fail our children. So anyways, that's my soapbox. Okay, Sarah, I hope that answered your question. Okay. Oh, more questions. What suggestions do you have for sensory regulation when a student is not interested in fidgets? Oh, that's such a good question. So make sure you listen to Danielle, and I interviewed a neurodivergent OT, I think 2 Mondays ago, so go back to that. But that's a good question, but I think this is where a collaboration with an OT might help. So if you have a kinesthetic learner, for sure a movement break is needed. So a lot of times you can provide that opportunities within the classroom schedule or within your therapeutic session. So maybe if you're learning about, I'm trying to think of in a speech like therapeutic session, what would you do? Maybe you would stand up and work on, as you work on your vocal practices, for example. So experiment with that, different ways. You can also go from one spot to another within the therapeutic room to find stuff, like play I Spy, for example. And then you can incorporate the speech goal practice in that. yeah, so a lot of students are not yet interested in fidgets. If that's the case, you want to model it a lot, you know, so we play with the fidgets and see if over time they can develop interest. There's so many different kinds of fidgets, you guys, so many. Yes, Melanie said, yeah, most autistic people of all ages, we really understand, not just understand, we really sense people's intention. Like if the adult is so anxious, we sense it, and we sense it in a very heightened way, and a lot of times that's why we can't learn, isn't it, Melanie? Because it's just a feeling of that that I need to fight and flight because that person is not offering safety for me. So that's why. So maybe this answer the other parent's question. And you know, I'm very, very direct when I answer questions. It's not, I'm not saying at all that you're not a good mom, you're not a good teacher, a good clinician, because that's just how that's how I am. Melanie knows this. Melanie and I are the same. We are what we get. What you see is what you get. So, okay, guys, I think that's all. I actually managed to cover everything in less than 1 hour. So the recording will be published. If you have any questions that you think of later, you could just put it in the discussion thread, and then I'll do my best to answer, or I'm happy to do this session again. But I hope this is helpful. I hope you can write better IEP goals. And thank you, Melanie. Love you too. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you guys so much. Bye. Have a good week.